Welcome everyone to Disability Rights South Carolina DRSC Youth session. Today we are going to cover Vocational Rehabilitation 101. Going to go over a few things with you all before we get started. Number one, this session is being recorded and will be put on YouTube after the fact. Next, I have muted everybody. We are going to take questions at the end. We'll leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. You can put those questions in the chat box whenever you think of them. I'll also allow for you to raise your hand at the end as well. We do ask that during the question and answer, please don't put any personal information into those questions, just since they are going to be put on YouTube. Our next two sessions, just so everyone is aware, is Assistive Technology and Students with Disabilities. That will be August 21st. And Medicaid 102, Waivers and Waiver Case Management. And that will be on September 18th. So we hope you can join us for those sessions as well. Today's speaker is Mary Stevenson. She is our advocate coordinator here at Disability Rights South Carolina, and she has her MSW from Winthrop University. And we welcome you, Mary, and I'll let you go ahead and start.
Hey everyone, give me just a second to get my view set up. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Maggie said, my name is Mary Stevenson. I'm an advocate coordinator here at Disability Rights. I supervise a team of advocates who work on various issues that come for disability rights, including education, employment, and VR, or Commission for the Blind related concerns. So this presentation, like Maggie says, VR 101, and a little bit of information about the Cloud and Assistance Program. The VR 101, I will explain. Maggie, do you mind going back? The VR 101 really is very general. VR process, what it would look like, application, eligibility, a plan setup, is very general overview of the VR process. And then I will explain a little bit about the Cloud and Assistance Program and what we can do, how we can help individuals if they contact us. Okay, next slide, please. Hey, so anyone who sat through any of our presentations, we tend to start with a quick overview of disability rights, South Carolina in general, and our goals, our mission, what kind of things we help with. So let's dive right into that. Next up, please. Okay. Our mission is to protect the legal, civil, and human rights of individuals with disabilities in South Carolina. How do we do that? There's several different ways we can do that. We can empower individuals to advocate for themselves, or we can advocate on their behalf. If they've already tried self-advocacy, or we feel it's already risen to the level that they need more direct assistance, we can advocate for them. We can educate the public, stakeholders, policymakers about laws that protect individuals with disabilities, and we'll advocate for policies or laws that advance their rights and their desires of individuals with disabilities. Next slide, please. Okay. Disability Rights South Carolina is the protection and advocacy agency for South Carolina. Protection and advocacy is a series of agencies that are mandated by state and federal laws to protect the rights of people with disabilities. Every state has one. There are 57 nationwide. Every state, district, territory, they all have a P&A system. Disability Rights South Carolina is a nonprofit, a private nonprofit, and we provide services statewide for free. And we're independent of agencies that provide other services like DDSN, the Centers for Independent Living, the Department of Education. We're independent from all of them. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we're done with general disability rights, South Carolina. I'm going to dive into a little bit of vocational rehabilitation background for the agencies and the eligibility process. If you don't mind, next slide. Okay. So the vocational rehabilitation program, the purpose is to assess, plan, develop, and provide VR services to eligible individuals with disabilities that's consistent with their strengths, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. Generally what VR does is, though, help individuals with disabilities prepare for, get, keep, or advance in employment. And they'll help job seekers access work, education, or training in order to get a job, or a variety of support services in order to help them to reach their employment goals. And the goal of VR ultimately is competitive integrated employment, which in layman's terms is employment with an employer and co-workers that are non-disabled. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, South Carolina vocational rehabilitation agencies, there are two. South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation Department, this is a general VR agency for South Carolina. Any disability can receive services from South Carolina VR. And South Carolina Commission for the Blind is a separate agency established to assist individuals who need VR services related to low vision or blindness. Every state has the option to set up a separate agency. Every state has a VR, but some, including South Carolina, set up a separate blind agency. In order to receive services for the Commission for the Blind, you don't have to be fully blind. You can be legally blind, which means with correction, you can see better than a certain amount. Or you can have low vision, or you can have disability or a medical condition that may result in blindness in the future. So if you fall under that criteria, you may be eligible to receive services from the Commission for the Blind. For clarification throughout this presentation, I will be saying VR, but that refers to both South Carolina VR and the South Carolina Commission for the Blind. If I'm specifying something for the Commission for the Blind, I will say the Commission, just to keep it simple. Both VR and the Commission receive funding to provide vocational rehabilitation services for individuals with disabilities. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, diving into the VR, application process. How to apply for VR services. An individual with a disability or their representative can apply for VR services simply by contacting the VR agency in person, phone, or in writing. You can call the local office and let them know you want to receive services, and they should get the application started. They might ask you to sign a form or application form, or provide information that I need to start determining eligibility. Other agencies can also make referrals, like centers for independent living, school districts, other service providers can make referrals to VR. Okay. Next slide, please. So there's some criteria that have to be satisfied to be determined eligible for VR services. You have to have a physical or mental impairment that creates a barrier to employment. And you need to require VR services to prepare for, secure, retain, regain, or advance employment. And the services need to be consistent with your strengths, abilities, interests, and informed choice. So to boil that down, you need to have some form of disability that creates a barrier to getting, keeping, or advancing in work. And you need VR services to help you overcome those barriers. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the concept of presumption of benefits. This section will actually go over several slides. So basically, to start, VR services can be denied if a person is determined unable to benefit from services. To explain that, eligibility and ability to benefit are really two different determinations. You could satisfy the eligibility criteria, have a disability, need help getting a job, need VR services, but you might not be able to benefit from receiving VR services. Don't worry, I will explain the difference and how those determinations are met. If you are found eligible to receive services, then you are at that point presumed to be able to benefit. So if you satisfy the criteria, then VR presumes you can benefit at that point. If VR disagrees or is not sure you can benefit, it needs to show clear and convincing evidence that you're not able to benefit from services. If the individual receives Social Security disability insurance or a supplemental security income, SSDI or SSI, they are presumed to be eligible and to be able to benefit from services. Okay. So the process, once you've applied for VR services, eligibility, how is that determined? Eligibility needs to be determined within 60 days of application, unless there is an unforeseen circumstance and the applicant and the VR counselor agree to an extension. The assessment for eligibility, it needs to be based on what information is already there, if possible. Doctor's records, other records showing disability and how it affects your ability to work. If that information is already there, VR needs to look at that first. If it's not enough information or need further assessments, then they can refer for additional assessments. As part of the eligibility and assessment for ability to benefit, if a person has a significant disability, they may go through a trial work experience, and I will explain that in a minute what that is. Next slide, please. So trial work experiences now. Trial work experience typically takes place if VR is concerned that an individual might not be able to benefit from VR services. Basically, if they're concerned, might be too disabled to benefit from services. So, a trial work experience basically what it says, an attempt to place some work, test it out, see if it's possible with the supports. It has to be in realistic, integrated work settings, consistent with informed choice, which a discussion with the consumer representative, figure out what kind of job might be a good fit, what do you want to do? Okay, let's try. They can include supported employment, on-the-job training, various other supports, and they need to be of sufficient variety of duration. If one doesn't work, try another one, figure out if we're able to get to a point where something can work. And VR needs to provide supports, assistive technology, accommodations in order to try to figure out what might work for this individual to be able to receive services. Next slide, please. Okay. So if you're going through the eligibility process, what happens if VR determines that this person is not eligible to receive services? That decision is made after a full consultation with the individual or their representative. They need to have a conversation about it, the decision, and it needs to be put in writing, explaining the reasons why VR doesn't feel this person's eligible. And it has to include information on how they can ask for a review or appeal that decision. It needs to include information on how you can contact Cloud Assistance Program. And you can make referrals to other programs that might be better fit, may be better able to help this person who can make that referral. And if requested by the applicant, it can be reviewed within 12 months. Next slide, please. Okay. So, eligibility has been determined. What's the next step? So I'm going to jump into setting up a plan, outlining a couple of common services VR can include. If you don't mind, next slide, please. Okay, individualized plan for employment, IPE. That is the document. That's really the first step. Okay, you're eligible. You can benefit from our services. They set up an IPE. That is the guiding document for VR services. What will be provided? How will they be provided? Timelines. The first thing you will notice on the document is the employment goal. And that goal tends to guide what services are provided. Like, what do you need from VR to reach that goal? And consistent with informed choice. It has to be signed and agreed upon by both the consumer and the VR counselor. And it's best to develop it as soon as possible, but within 90 days of the eligibility determination, unless an extension is agreed upon. So for the timelines, when you apply, there's a 60-day deadline to determine if you're eligible or not. And then once eligibility determination is made, that triggers a 90-day deadline to set up the IPE. Both of them can be extended if agreed upon. If something comes up, can't finish within that timeline, then you can agree upon an extension. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So the employment goal, like I mentioned before, that's really what drives what VR services will receive. The goal itself needs to be based on the individual's strengths, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. Basically a conversation between the individual and the counselor. What do you want to do? What field are you interested in? What are your abilities? And if the person isn't sure what kind of work they want to do, if they don't know, then VR can do an assessment to help them pinpoint their area of interest, what kinds of jobs might be a good fit based on their strengths or needs. And they can also assess what kind of services might be needed to help them reach that goal. Done. Okay, so the IPE review and amendments for the IPE. The IPE needs to be reviewed at least annually by the individual and the counselor. But it can be amended at any time. Really, the annual review is to kind of check in. Is the goal still the same? Are the services needed still the same? Does anything need to be added? But basically to make sure it's still current. But there's no need to wait for once a year, have a meeting, and there's no need to wait for that. It can be amended at any time. The amendments could be if there's a change in the employment goal. Say, for example, if someone is working towards a goal, but as they're working on that, they're starting to realize this might not be a good fit. I might not enjoy this. It might not be a good use of my strengths, and they can pivot to a different goal. You can amend the IPE for that. Services being provided, if we're working towards a goal and comes from a point where, oh, I need a little bit of additional support here, then you can amend. Or if you're working and realize, oh, the service isn't necessary anymore, you can amend that as well. If you run into an issue with service providers or need to change the providers for whatever reason, that can be amended. This is not an exhaustive list. Really, an amendment can be anything that changes within the IPE document. Next slide, please. Now I want to talk a little bit about the concept of informed choice, because I know I've mentioned that several times already, so I kind of want to touch on it. And what does that mean? Because that's a bit of an abstract concept. Basically, VR must give individuals information and services to exercise their own informed choice so they can contribute to their success throughout the rehabilitation process. That can include discussions about the employment goal or outcome, or what VR services are needed to reach that goal, or the providers of the VR services. So, to boil that down, there needs to be ongoing conversation, communication between the counselor and the consumer. What would you prefer? What do you want? Here's what we can offer, and allow them the opportunity to get feedback on how the case is proceeding. Yep. Next slide, please. Well, here's some examples of commonly included VR services that are included in the IPE. Counseling and guidance. That is automatically included in pretty much every employment plan. What that means is really a service where the counselor will touch base with the client. They'll have conversations periodically. How are things going? Are there any issues you're running into? Is there anything else you need from us? Basically, that is a service that opens the door to ongoing communication between the counselor and the consumer. VR can provide payment for training programs, certificates, technical schools, college degrees. If you want to work in a field that requires you to have certain specialized training, or if you need a certain level of degree to get a job in that field, VR can consider assisting with that. It can provide a range of job-related services like training, help with search and placement, or job retention services. Like if you run into something where you need something from VR to help you keep that job, then they can look into helping with that. Supported and customized employment. Basically, the taking a job and adapting it to better fit the unique needs of that individual, or providing additional supports for that employment to help the person maintain the job. VR can also pay for work supplies like a uniform, shoes, tools, and so on. If you get a job and they require you to pay for your own pair of specialized shoes, VR can help with that. Now, to clarify, that doesn't mean VR will pay all the way out, like every time you need a new pair of shoes. But it can help you get started and then go on. Next slide, please. And just a few more examples. Personal assistance services or rehabilitation and assistive technology. If you have a job, but you need some kind of assistive technology to help you do that job, and VR can help with that. I will explain a little more in depth about rehab tech and that process in a couple minutes. Physical or mental restoration services that aren't covered by insurance. Basically, what that means is if you want to work in a certain field, but you need a type of physical therapy to be able to regain mobility to do that work. If you don't have insurance that will cover it, or nothing else will cover the cost, that VR can look into providing assistance for that. They can help with self-employment as well. If your person's interested and might want to do self-employment, VR can partner with other agencies that have more expertise in that area, can help see what might be needed, explore that possibility, develop a business plan, whatever might be needed. Transportation connected with a VR service. I want to explain that a little bit. The transportation, like for instance, if VR needs you to go get a specific kind of assessment, but you don't have transportation to get there, VR can help. The transportation needs to be connected with a VR service. They won't be able to provide transportation to and from work. But if there's a VR service that was agreed upon, but you need transportation help for that, and they can help. The last one, other goods and services. That's kind of a catch-all. If you need something that doesn't fit nice and neatly into any of those other checkboxes, then it could go under goods and services. But, like always, the service itself needs to be tied to an employment outcome, something that's needed to help you reach an employment goal or keep a job. Next slide, please. So I want to expand a little bit on job training with that. That's really kind of an umbrella term. There's a variety of skill building and educational services that VR can provide that helps determine and support the most appropriate employment outcome. Like soft skills training, resume building, and anything else helps you reach the employment goal. And again, the ultimate goal for VR services, competitive, integrated employment. Okay, now back to rehabilitation technology. I promised I would explain a little more about that. So, VR, South Carolina VR, and I believe the commission too, they have a department within the agency that specializes in rehab tech, assessing and helping find, adapting technology for the consumer. It starts with an individual evaluation. There's this technology services to help in overcoming employment barriers. They can include a wide variety. They include mobility aids, prosthetics, learning software, or hearing and visual aids, and so on and so forth. Again, this is not exhaustive. Ultimately, if someone has a job or is trying to get a job but needs assistive technology to be able to do that, then VR can assess. Services related to assistive technology. It can include purchase of a technology. VR can help with that. Bidding or customizing certain tech. If it's a standard piece of tech, it needs to be adjusted somehow or fitted to the individual, VR can help with that. Instruction or training on how to use or how to interact with the device. that can be provided as part of the rehab tech too. Next slide, please. Okay. All right, so you have a VR case open, you got a job. Now, when can VR close the case? Case closure can happen when an individual has achieved an employment outcome that's on their IP and maintained that employment for 90 days and no longer needs other services from VR. So really the time they aim for is 90 days, but suppose if you get a job and things are going well, but on day 60 you realize, oh, I need some software installed on my computer or something, for example. And you're waiting on that, but day 90 passes. It doesn't mean the case will automatically be closed. It's just if you no longer need any more services from VR, then they can look into closing at 90 days. The individual and the VR counselor need to agree that the job outcome was sufficient and there's no more services that are needed. That the individual needs to be informed of the availability of post-employment services. So what's available after the case has been closed? If you run into something like, oh, I need some additional support to keep this job, or a tech need, or if something comes up after the case is closed, what's available, what can they access, and any timelines or deadlines regarding post-employment services. Yep. Okay, now I'm gonna switch track a little bit and talk a little bit about two different things. Pre-employment transition services, which are called pre-ETS, and transition services. If you don't mind, next slide, please. Okay. We'll start with pre-ETS. That is a service that VR can provide. It's available for all students with disabilities. You don't have to apply or be deemed eligible for VR services. The age range for that is 13 to 21. As long as the student is enrolled in school or post-secondary education program or other recognized education program, they can receive pre-ETS. Next slide, please. Pre-ETS really includes 5 different services that VR needs to provide. Job exploration, counseling, workplace readiness training, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary opportunities, and self-advocacy skills. So, back up, please. So to boil down, basically providing services to help a student explore what options are out there as far as jobs, what soft skills or other workplace readiness training might be needed, internships or summer programs could fall under work-based learning experiences. Looking into if a student wants to get a degree or wants a certificate in whatever specialized work, or wants to go straight to work, explore what opportunities are there. And self-advocacy training, because I will tell you self-advocacy is important for individuals with disabilities. Yeah. Okay. There. So, shifting to transition services. That service available to students and youth with disabilities who are eligible for VR services. So you have to go through the application process to receive transition services. VR, once someone is receiving transition services, VR can be involved in the transition planning process while the student's still in school, which means they can go to IEP meetings, help in developing transition plan, help figure out what student will need for transition, who will provide what opportunities are out there, and collaborate with the school. It needs to be based on the student's needs, preferences, and interests. And really, the transition services from VR can help to smooth over the switch from school to whatever the post-secondary goal is, college, tech school, or just going straight to work, because transition services can help smooth over that. Next slide, please. Okay, so I finished talking about the VR process, what it looks like, what services can be provided. Now, what if you have a case, but you have concerns and you're not satisfied? What can you do? Then, next slide, please. Okay, so if you're running into concerns with your VR case, there's several different things you can do. We typically suggest first try to talk with the counselor, try to get on the same page, resolve any areas of confusion, see if that clears things up. If that doesn't work, you can go to the area supervisor or the commission. I believe they're called regional directors. These supervisors supervise local offices. They typically can answer questions, resolve any conflicts or concerns, answer any questions that are where you're confused about the services you're getting. They typically can be very helpful. That doesn't work. There's two things you can do. You can contact Ombudsman's office. Both VR and the commission have an ombudsman's office. That office is there to help resolve conflicts or concerns from consumers. Or you can contact Cloud Assistance Program. Well, it doesn't have to be related to a complaint. It could just be, I have a question, or I need some clarification, or if it is a concern, you can contact CAP. The last two really don't have to happen in that order. You can choose one or the other, or do both, or do one and then the other. It's really up to you. What do you prefer? Yeah.
Mary, I hate to interrupt,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure you're aware on time that we are at 12:45 right now.
Okay. Sorry, do you mind saying that again? Okay. I'll burn through the next couple slides really quick. Yeah, the Cloud Assistance Program. Next slide, please. So to explain, Disability Rights South Carolina has the Cloud Assistance Program for South Carolina. The Cloud Assistance Program, or CAP, is an agency mandated by the Rehabilitation Act. And again, all states have one. Some have it within their P&A system. Some have a separate agency, but in South Carolina, the cap is under disability rights. Um, what we do is we can help people who apply for or receive services from VR or the Centers for Independent Living. And we can inform people about their rights to competitive integrated employment, rights to accommodations, or rights to be free from discrimination. Next slide, please. Okay. So the CAP, who can we help? Well, we help people who want to receive services or are receiving services from the South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation Department, South Carolina Commission for the Blind, or the Centers for Independent Living. Next slide, please. Okay. So the CAP can help people with disabilities to communicate effectively with VR, the Commission. If they're struggling to communicate their needs or their concerns, we can help them. We can inform them about the availability of VR services from both VR or the Commission. If they have questions about their rights to reasonable accommodations or how to self-advocate with an employer, we can help them with that too. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. If a person needs or wants to receive services from the Centers for Independent Living, we can help. There are 3 in South Carolina. Able, South Carolina tends to work from Midlands to the upstate, that area. Walton Options is around the Georgia border, Low Country area. And Accessibility is, I believe, centered in Charleston. We can provide training to help them understand their rights to services from either of those agencies, and inform them about their employment rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Yep. Next slide, please. All right. When should you contact the CAP? If you've been turned down from services, you do not have to have an open and active case. If you've been denied eligibility, you can contact us. If you need a better plan in place to help you reach your employment goals, if you need help with rehab tech from the Commission for the Blind, or if you need financial assistance for college or tech school, a degree program, you can contact us. If you need better pre-ets or a better transition plan, you can contact us. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our contact information, helpline, our email address. Our website is there too. We have a lot of resources on our website if you want to click around over there and see what you find. Please. This is just our standard disclaimer that some of our funders require us to have them.
Thank you very much,
That's
Mary.
it. Yeah.
So we do have about 10 minutes for questions. I do have one already in the chat box that we can start off with. If you joined us late, if you have a question, you can write it in the chat box or raise your hand. We do have a few minutes. We do have a hard stop at 1. However, our first question in the chat box, Mary, is, do you have to be on a waiver to receive services with VR?
No, no, you do not have to be under a waiver to receive VR services.
And if you joined us late, I will go ahead and make a reminder that the entire presentation will be put on YouTube within a week or two. And so if you want to go back and see anything that you might have missed, that will be available for you. All right, I do have another question in the chat box for you, Mary. Are there any rules or regulations that VR locations have to be accessible to get to? For example, sorry, I can't read this on my screen. For example, those individuals who rely on fixed route public transit to get to a VR location.
You mean if an individual generally uses the bus system, but the VR building itself is not within an accessible distance from bus stop?
I believe that's how I read it. Yes.
Okay. Okay. VR can still look into how can we help you if you want to ride public transportation, how can we help you to get to our office from there? They can still look into how can we provide transportation assistance. Transportation assistance can be provided in a various number of ways. You can get creative with it. So I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions today? We have just a few more minutes. All right, well, I don't see any hands raised or anybody currently typing in the chat box. Do remember our contact information is up on the screen currently. Our helpline is there to help you. So if you have any individual questions that you're hoping an advocate can speak to you with about, please don't hesitate to call or email them. And we thank you so much for joining us today. And that will be it. Thank you and goodbye.
Mhm.